Check, check.
We're good?
Check, check. I'm good. Hello, online people. Okay. We're set. I'm just going to do the introduction.
So it's kind of just this is what it does. I think it's small enough room that I can open up questions. Just a general chat. Introduce what William, what is it?
Judah, we're all good? Okay. Okay, welcome everybody. The microphone is just simply for the online stuff so that the people can actually hear us that are joining us online. So don't expect me to be amplified at all. I'll use my my teacher voice while I'm in here. So anyways, welcome to the Industry Summit. We've been working on this obviously for since last last year, and hoping we could do something live again, and we're so excited to have something live. And we're just so excited to have all the filmmakers here and to be able to, participate and have everybody in the same room again. Because last time we were able to do this was 2019, and at that time, it was so exciting. Like we had events here, we had them at Sheridan College. It was our first really kind of venture into really promoting the industry stuff and being part of getting the filmmakers to be more interactive with the festival. So this is great that we have you here and participating in this. If you ever get chances at other festivals to do this and to be part of industry days and part of the seminars, I highly recommend going and doing them, because I have been to festivals all over the world, and I have seen everything that everybody does, and there's some amazing festivals, some amazing things that they do with the industry. And we're trying to help model that same thing here from some of the great things that we've seen. So if you need any recommendations of where to go or what to put things into, I can tell you all that information as well. But this morning we want to get started with our first session here. And one of the things that I know that filmmakers are always interested in is gear and what the latest trends are in production and all of that. And there are so many new technologies that are coming out now. And I mean, they're constantly coming out with new things. But we really wanted to bring Greg Jess from William F. White, who, he's the expert in all of this stuff. And there's all sorts of cool things that they're doing as well. I was, for me personally, I wasn't as familiar with what they do in this industry as I should have been, and I'm going to be just as interested as you to sit here and listen to all the things that go on in this industry in Canada, and what we have available to us, because it's really amazing what we have available, and that's what Greg's here for. So I'm going to pass it over, and you can tell everybody what you're up to, and we'll get some stuff going over here if we need it.
Thank you very much. So my name is Greg Jeffs. I work with William F. White. If you're not familiar with who William F. White is or what William F. White is we are a 50-plus-year-old company, one of the oldest in Canada, that focuses on providing equipment for the film and television industry. Primarily for the first part of our 50-plus years, we were lighting and grip. Now, as of 2022, we encompass lighting, grip, power, specialty equipment, camera, studios, virtual production, and location equipment services. So we are that big, giant 40-foot trailer you see on a huge film set with our big William F. White logo on the side. We're the the big scary monster in the room when it comes to digital and emerging and lower budget filmmakers. My job is to work with specifically Canadian filmmakers with Canadian projects. I don't deal much with the Netflixes and the Amazons. We have teams that handle that. My job is to make sure that Canadian voices are still seen and heard and get a chance to play in the sandbox as much as everybody else. So it's a really cool job because We get to be creative. I know we have budget issues when it comes to Canadian filmmakers. I'm a filmmaker myself. I just produced a micro-budget project, $300,000 project this April. So I know the pains that we go through. But it's also imperative for us as a company to be able to support Canadians and have them feel that they can approach us. You can come and have a talk with me about your project at any stage. My position's unique because a lot of times I'm dealing with people that have projects that are 2 years off the track. Script stage, putting together financing packages, doing this weekend alone, we're doing 3 proof of concept pieces for pitch packages that are going out. So helping filmmakers figure out the tone of their project before they even get the camera, before they're even financed, is a big thing that we really want to encourage, because it allows people to cut their teeth and figure out what their project is going to feel like as they start putting their packages together. Again, it's been a very unique position because we can have conversations at any stage. And again, budgets vary. If you're doing a web series, you may have $200,000, you may have $2 million. If you're doing a feature, you may have $200,000, $2 million. It really depends on what it is that you're looking to get out of the project, that's where my work comes in. And we can sit down and beat out your needs, figure out exactly what it is that's going to make your project pop. Lighting and grip is easy. It's metal and wood and dirt. The big costs that we're seeing in this space are things like camera, specialty equipment, but we don't want you to feel as filmmakers like it's excluded. You're excluded from the mix. There's no way I can shoot with a particular piece of equipment because I don't have the budget. While that may be true in some of the larger pieces, there's always a good, better, best option that our 50 plus years of the industry, or being in the industry, really helps create some cool stuff with very little money. We have a 300,000 square foot warehouse in Toronto full of gear, and most independent filmmakers, when they come to us for the first time, they're having not been exposed to the industry for that long. They're usually asking what they read online or what somebody who's been working in the industry tells them about, and that's usually the top 1% of the equipment. LEDs and all these lights that everyone knows and is buzzworthy, but at the same time, with a 300,000 square foot warehouse, there's a lot that filmmakers are missing. So I'm super approachable in the Toronto area. I've walked through tours. We can sit down. Zoom calls are a great byproduct of the pandemic, if there was anything that was good about it. A 30-minute Zoom call can cover a lot of bases. Again, I'm a filmmaker myself, so we talk about funding. We talk about where the streams of funds lie, and also what kind of opportunities exist for certain particular projects. And a lot of it is before we even start talking about C-stands and sandbags. So this is a bit of a unique kind of setup today. This is just for the camera, I think, right? So kind of informal, but I'm going to show you some cool stuff. Just a few things that we've been working on, and a couple things that are certainly buzzworthy in the industry. But I also want to make sure, since you're here, you came out at 8 o'clock in the morning to have some breakfast and have listen to me natter on. I want to open it up for conversation too, right? Let's form this so that it becomes valuable to you. If you have a project, or if you have questions, or if you just generally are intrigued about something in the industry that we might be able to help on, let's open it up to some conversation. So if you have, as we go along, if there's any questions, or if there's anything that's like really gnawing at you, I'm more than happy to have that chat with everyone so that we can get that information. Otherwise, I'm going to show you some cool videos, and we'll talk about some cool technology that's coming down the pipe. But so I guess first, before we dive into that, is there anything that's pressing from anybody out there who wants to know about what William F. White is, anything about the film industry, any questions that you've got before we kind of tuck into cool stuff? Nothing? Sweet. Excellent. All right, completely understandable. So I guess the big things is, as Dale mentioned, the way technology has changed has really kind of driven a real renaissance. It's insane the amount of gear available for filmmakers now. There was a time, believe it or not, looking at the age range here, there was a thing called film, and we actually used it to make TVs and films. That's what the word is based on. So when film was around, there was a very different kind of lighting structure. It was basically HMI, tungsten, KinoFlow lighting. So these were lights that had different color temperatures, big, massive lights because you had different film stock that could only that would need a lot of light in order to expose it. Newer technology, as we started to shift to digital sensors, we started to see LED technology come out, and you can really tell if you're a film purist or if you're someone who's been around and really likes film and television, you can kind of really easily spot where LED kind of comes into play. Where LED became popular. And LED from a finance standpoint, if you're a producer in the room, LED is brilliant because you can light an entire set with 2 people and an iPhone. The cost issues that arise for Canadian filmmakers is that because this is so popular and because it is a newer technology, it comes with a supply and demand. And I'm sure you've all seen the notes about the film industry in Canada being a billion-dollar industry. And so when that billion-dollar industry, the Netflix, the Amazons, the Disneys, the Foxes, the Universal, Warners, that come up and service produce here in Canada, they have budget, and despite what we would think, they have cash flow issues as well. And so in that space, they want to try and find the best tools to make their job easier. Gaffers, grips, they all kind of like using the new technology, especially when it's on Disney's dime. So all of that new stuff that comes out, it kind of ends up being set at a higher price point. And so when I'm dealing with younger and newer and emerging filmmakers is we try to look to our past. What got us here? How did we get to love film? Let's look at your book. Let's look at your comps, your kind of reference photos that you use. Every single conversation I've had with younger filmmakers, when they get excited about their project, they show me their reference photos. Not one of them is from a film that was shot in 2018 or later. 2018 is when LED kind of started to be a little bit prevalent in the film industry. Everything else is shot on, exposed on film, lit with lighting that is on the shelf, but not necessarily the most popular lights. So these conversations around technology are very important because there are ways that technology can absolutely save your ass in a production, like being able to have the ability to change color on the fly on camera is amazing, rather than have a team flopping around with gels and trying to change the color of an actual light on, while the camera's rolling. LED makes perfect sense there. If in these conversations that we have about your project, we can talk about, rather than there be a wall of sky panels behind the camera set to 55-degree Kelvin, how about we just use KinoFlow? KinoFlow's fluorescent tube lighting. We have a ton of fixtures, and 6 sky panels is going to cost thousands of dollars. 6 KinoFlow ballasts is going to cost hundreds. You'll get the same effect looking through the lens. It'll be the same color. It'll be a bit more of a pain on set because you can't sit in a chair and dial it up. You might actually have to physically go and push a button or turn a tube. But it's kind of the big difference that we want to help filmmakers understand is that there's going to be a demand, especially of DPs and of gaffers, to say like we want the best gear. But at the same time, it's not bad gear. It's just not LED. And there's tons of it. So these conversations that we have with filmmakers really help us shape them and extend their budget. We have a project that's out right now on Shudder over in, I guess they're in Hamilton now. Black Fawn Productions had a project called Vicious Fun. And they came to us, it might have been at the festival, I'm not sure if it was screened here a couple years ago, but it's on Shudder. Check it out. They came to us in a panic because their budget is very tight. They're a low budget Canadian genre movie. They had a Chinese food restaurant that they were going to build on a set. So, you know, naturally in that kind of space, you need lots of neons, lots of colors to kind of create the look that they want, the DP and the art department wanted. We looked at LED technology, and that's certainly the easiest way that everyone would have just assumed. I could get a bunch of Astera tubes, LED tubes, and connect them all to my phone and put them on orange or blue or green. They weren't changing, and the big difference here was they were not changing the color of the light on camera. It was literally just fixtures in the space. So we looked at that, we compared what was available in the LED space, and it was thousands of dollars because LED is the most popular piece right now. We came in, I brought their DP and their team in, and we reminded them that in the 90s, there was a thing called Much Music, and there were music videos. And because of that whole, even in the US, the MTV space, there was a company called KinoFlow, which does fluorescent tubing. And they created a bunch of, they're discontinued now, but they created a bunch of colored KinoFlow tubes that you could literally pop into a KinoFlow, which is a tungsten, or sorry, a little fluorescent kind of a plug adapter thing. And it's colored, bright, very vibrant, perfect for a music video in the 90s, but also perfect for a Chinese food restaurant set in 2020 when you don't have a lot of money. So they were able to take out, rather than an Astera kit, which I believe is about $700, we were able to get them KinoFlow tubes, which were $3 each. And it was, again, just dipping into that 300,000 square foot warehouse to find the pieces that were there. So, you know, technology, as far as it's moved us in our, you know, the accessibility, that has been a huge bonus for Canadian filmmakers, in my opinion, because of that other 99% of the gear that everyone's not looking at, especially the larger productions which are driving the economy. If there is an opportunity to come in with your budget, you know, figure out what shots. Everyone needs a lighting grip package. That's there's no doubt about that. It's a basic package. So for us, that's the easy part. Let's figure out where can we solve a lot of these problems on the lighting grip side, and then look to the specialty stuff. What is that shot that you're going to do in your movie that's going to be your trailer piece? What's going to hook people in? Or what shot has, as a director or as a DP, so much resonance with you that you need to make sure that it's preserved? Those are the things that we dig out in these conversations that we have via Zoom, because lighting, it's metal, it's wood, it's dirt, you know, grip is easy, lighting's, you know, easy once we solve those solutions, but then it gives you the freedom to look at your, you know, 5-minute short or your 90-minute movie and say, these are the 5 or 6 key shots that are really important to making this thing pop. And then that frees up the ability for us to find those pieces. And then we get to explore stuff. And that takes us to our specialty department, which, you know, specialty in the film industry, White's, it's referred to as White Specialty Equipment, or WSE. And in that space, it's essentially all sorts of conveyance. How do we move the camera? Is that camera going to be on a crane? Is it going to be on a jib arm? Is it going to be on a go-kart? Is it going to be on an RC car? Is it going to be on a camera car? Is it going to be on wires? Like all of the options that you can ever imagine to move a camera. We have it, and we've used it. And more importantly, it is here in Canada. And that's a big, big, big thing that filmmakers need to really understand, is the industry, Shape of Water, Pacific Rim, all these like really crazy big budget features that use all these really cool tools, they use them because they're here. And so as Canadians, we understand that these are the resources that are available to the industry. They're expensive, but that doesn't mean there aren't options. So at this point, this is where that conversation with Whites comes in, where we start talking about, all right, well, you know, we want to move the camera. You've got a really cool shot, and you saw it in like Silent Hill. All right, we shot Silent Hill. Let's go back and find out the exact packages, the tools that they used to pull that movie or pull that shot that you wanted. Or you bring in a video, like a capture of a video game of a camera movement that you want to try and recreate. Those are what we love to see. We love to be able to do that, because then we can look at it and say, okay, well, there's a couple of options here. One is the best, most expensive option, which is put it on like a techno crane. Another option is putting it on a fixed arm dolly or a fixed length jib arm. You don't have to pay for techs in that space. We can look at and we can demonstrate to you as a filmmaker by bringing you in, showing you what that effect looks like and feels like on camera, because we have the resources there. It's busy, timing and everything kind of comes into play, but at the very least, from a filmmaker, then you start to understand that it's not just hanging out the side of your car to get a shot. Because for me, my focus is, as a Canadian filmmakers, I care less about the project than I do about you as an individual. So as a filmmaker, if you're a young independent filmmaker making a short film, I would much rather you be able to walk away from that short film having had the experience of professional equipment, because that will be far more valuable to your career than a film that wins a bunch of prizes at small festivals, because nobody really at that level cares about that. But if somebody's going to hire you and you're pitching on something and you have the experience of a techno crane, that will help you in that pitch and help you get that job. And so for me, finding those assets or finding those points where we can say, let's help you help yourself in your career, at the end of the day, that's where these goals happen. So then we sit down as you're at the very early stages and figure out what are you going to get out of the film from an experience level, because we know film is really hard to sell. Film and television, there's so much content. They dropped the Umbrella Academy like yesterday, and people have already watched all of it. How is that going to remain? But the people who worked on that set have jobs going forward. So from the industry standpoint, this is what we're trying to help filmmakers is there something that you can do on every project that's going to help you as an individual advance your career going forward. Technology is certainly the answer in that space. A lot of it is some of the older tech, dollies, cranes, bits and pieces like that. But that's kind of the kind of lead into the conversations that we try to have. Am I stirring up any questions, or can I keep yammering? Sweet. All right, I'm going to show you something really cool now, because this is something I've been a champion of this for about 6-7 years. So this is kind of a bit of a conflux here. There's a platform that exists outside of film called the Unreal video game engine. So it's free. This is you guys are all independent filmmakers, so I'm going to be talking to you as one independent filmmaker to another. The Unreal engine is exactly that. It is unfucking real. It will blow your mind if you get a chance to sit around and just play with it. There's a massive learning curve, but there's also a very easy entry point for a lot of things. And what the Unreal engine does is it's basically a gaming engine that you can create video game levels. And depending on your computer and depending on the processing power of your computer, you can make that level look like Super Mario, or you can make it look like photorealistic backgrounds. In their genius, Epic Games made the platform free and made it available for anybody to kind of mess around with, and that automatically opens the doors to broke-ass filmmakers. And the broke-ass filmmakers will drive the industry. That's why we have Kevin Smiths and we have these guys that change the industry in that space. And one of those things that filmmakers realized is, oh, I can create locations. I can do some really cool stuff in this space, and my camera that I'm shooting on is digital. It's got a digital sensor. I'm not shooting on that film stuff. I can shoot on a sensor, and I can create something in a space that I don't have access to. And we started to see things with early stage Unreal way back in 2012 or when the hell it was, where people started doing they made movies within the engine using the characters in the video game space. And then people started to take the idea of green screen and putting green screen in with the virtual space. So you started to have virtual backgrounds and live action actors. And that became something that really skyrocketed and really became hugely popular. And then in, I think 4 years ago now, whenever it was, Disney came out with a show called The Mandalorian. And The Mandalorian opened the rest of everyone else's eyes up to the idea of what's called virtual production. And virtual production is essentially the high-end version of what these low-budget filmmakers were doing in their garage. Taking a virtual world that doesn't exist, putting live actors in front of that image, and because you're tricking the sensor of a camera, you can create magic. You can literally trick the eye into seeing a human being in front of a space that doesn't exist. So Mandalorian put that into hyperspace. William F. White, as of 2019, heavily invested in and has kind of started the trend here in Canada about virtual production. As of now, we have 2 virtual production volumes in Toronto, one down at the waterfront, one up in Mississauga. And we also, weirdly, have a Guinness Book of World Records certificate for the world's largest virtual production volume with our one in Vancouver that we're working on a project with Netflix on. So what is virtual production? We'll watch a video here in a sec, really quick, kind of cool clip. But essentially what virtual production is it's taking a virtual element, a world within, in this case, the Unreal 3D environment, but it can really be anything if you're that technologically advanced or inclined. Virtual production begins with not on a stage, not in a real environment. So we're not on a restaurant, we're in a studio. And in the studio, behind me, or behind you, depending where the camera lens is fixed, is a virtual restaurant. So it's a video game set, the same as if you were running through on your PlayStation. You've got tables, chairs, and everything, but it's all virtual. The camera looks through the lens and sees you as a human being, and it sees the background. And it's a camera. It sees ones and zeros. It can't tell the difference. So through the lens, it looks photorealistic, like I'm standing in a restaurant. Virtual production, as a trendsetter, has always been in that Unreal world. It's always been, the Mandalorian or Star Trek or Star Wars, or something that is created as a fake space. But virtual production, to me, as an independent tool, is hugely accessible and valuable. And I'll talk about that, but let's watch a quick, in case you're not familiar with virtual production, it's really slick, really cool. This little clip here is, I think, 48 seconds long, and then I'll talk about, hopefully we'll have some questions, but check it out. All right, so everything on the screen is in virtual, is not real. It's virtual. It's in a digital environment. So can you go back to the shot? Oh, there's music too. Look at that. Nice. Play through the start again, and I'll just tell you to pause in a sec here. All right, let's pause there for a second. All right, so what is virtual production then? So virtual production, this is done on our stage 6 in Toronto. So these pieces here, those are all real. Because you gotta, as a filmmaker, you wanna create illusionary planes, right? So putting something in front of the camera, putting it close to the lens, creates that foreground so that a human being can walk past. This building is not real. It doesn't exist. Everything beyond that little pile of dirt there is fake. So as the camera is looking through the lens, when we're on stage, we can obviously see. It's a giant thing that moves at a weird angle and looks kind of distorted, because virtual production as it's all ones and zeros, it's telling the lens of the it's dealing specifically with the lens of the camera. The computer does not care about these guys looking at the screen. All it cares about is the data and the information coming from the lens of the camera. So this piece, as it sits, this pile of dirt is the only real thing. So if we were sitting there going, all right, I think I heard somebody mention they're from Alberta. I spent 10 years in Calgary. Calgary has big, long days. You can shoot long hours, but it's not controllable. If you go out and say, I'm going to shoot one scene, we've got our biggest, most important scene, and we've got our biggest, most expensive actor, and we're going to get this one shot. It's just one shot. It's all we need. And we're going to stand out in the middle of the field in Calgary, Alberta, and we're going to get this shot because we need this one particular cloud to creep in front of the sun to get this really epic silhouette of our actor. You spend all day doing it, and you might not ever get the shot. The weather might not cooperate, might not do anything. Within the Unreal environment, we don't have footage of it, but we were doing it on set. This scene is in the Unreal space, and part of the Unreal space is luminance control. So you've got a sun, a fake sun in this environment. These shadows that this thing casts on the street in the background, that's completely controllable where we put the sun. So we can put that sun wherever we need it, and that entire day will have that perfect sunlight throughout the entire day. You have magic hour. Filmmakers in the room are familiar with that term. Magic hour can last your entire day. You know, you're not going to run into a problem of planes. You're not going to run into a problem of weather. You're not going to run into a problem of having the wrong light. It's always picture perfect. You're creating everything for the lens of the camera. So the other thing that I'm sure you guys are all wondering is, yes, this is the most expensive technology in the world, and filmmakers have a real hard time being able to access it. But I'm the independent guy. So the independent guy in me says, virtual production, as we see it here, is only one small factor of that buzzword. And if you take away anything of this conversation is do not be afraid of virtual production, okay? Because virtual production can and will, based on your filmmaking level right now, it'll become something that can be a huge value add and an asset in your technology, I guess, quiver going forward. The reason being is, as I mentioned before, the Unreal environment, Unreal gaming engine is free. You can go there and download it right now at Epic Games. Download the engine. Unreal 5 launched a couple months ago. It's insane. So this space, this virtual world that you see, these photorealistic things, these are all in virtual, in that 3D virtual engine. So how does that affect you as a filmmaker? So let's look at a practical scenario. You've got a large script. Telefilm gives you $200,000. So I've got to build a set, and I want to spend 30 days on this set, but I've got enough money to do 15. We're going to build a set. We've got 15 days. We've got 30 days of production. As a virtual production savant, as someone who has an understanding of that, you can find a solution that can play. And we did this on our last project. So what we did was we built a set. We had a video store. We had to build a video store on a stage in Hamilton. We had 15 days to shoot. There's a bunch of shots that we felt we didn't need to grab on the day. Things like the guy walking across, picking a tape up, doing that. We have a full crew, people, let's shoot the action and dialogue. Let's shoot everything that is imperative for us to get. And let's do a secondary shot list of all of our inserts that we can grab later. On day one of principal photography, our director, who's also our VFX guy, walked around the set before everyone was on there with an iPad Pro. These are $1,000, really high-end iPad, but there's a $1,000 iPad. Most people have it if they're technologically advanced. That iPad Pro comes with a LiDAR scanner, which is essentially getting all of the data. It takes a photo, but it scans in a LiDAR form so that it can collect all this data and all this information. So we literally walked around this set that we built out of wood and styrofoam and everything else that we could get our cheap little hands on. We scanned the set, and then that data that was scanned was input into the 3D engine, was input into the Unreal 3D environment. Photorealistic 4K images were now put onto big triangles and cubes inside this virtual space. What it allowed us to do was take our expensive, large schedule and look at it and say, let's get everything that's important, and then everything else we can capture virtually. So we now looked at a couple of the shots of like picking up the tape and putting these things in the drawers. All that stuff we can capture later. So we now had an important fine-tuned schedule that allowed us to get everything that needed our actors and our human beings that were imperative to be there, were there. And then everything else, the stuff that filmmakers lose time setting up, spending a lot of time trying to get the lighting perfect for that insert shot, all that stuff was allowed to come off our schedule, because when our filmmakers got back to Vancouver, they had a green screen. Now within the green screen, you shoot the piece in front of the green screen and the background is completely irrelevant because it's going to be replaced by whatever. But when you have your exact same footage inside your set that you shot at, that's when you can start capitalizing and utilizing virtual production in that space. And in order to do that, as a filmmaker, you're all capable of doing that. It costs $1,000-ish for an iPad Pro, because everything else in that space, if you're editing on iMovie, you can do chroma green screen inserts. That's the free editing software. You know, that one piece of equipment can open up virtual production for independent filmmakers. You can play around and explore other technology that exists. LED screens are the ones that you're going to hear, because that's the investment that this industry has made. That's what Mandalorian and Star Wars do. But if you look at things like TVO Kids, they've been using virtual production for years by shooting on a green screen with these little animated virtual backgrounds. This is technology that in the past few years has become readily available. A secondary technology that exists, it's called the zero density engine. And what the zero density engine does is it sits on top of the Unreal gaming environment, and it takes the data from your camera, and it automatically, as you're watching through the lens, applies your green screen. So instead of having the monitor behind you, you're still in front of a green screen, but on your monitor, you can actually see what this overlay looks like. You can see yourself in front of your virtual environment. And again, zero density and Unreal Gaming Engine are both free technologies that are available for everyone to play around and try out with. So as filmmakers, that's phenomenal. That's mind-blowing, because within that virtual space, in the Unreal, it's called the Unreal Marketplace, they have massive sets that are built. If you want to shoot in a castle, you can go and buy a video game's level, a castle on the Unreal environment for like $50. And you can move your camera anywhere in that space, and you can play around in that space. So virtual production, a big buzzword, but do not be terrified, do not be scared of it as independent filmmakers, because it will, if we're smart as filmmakers, it will become a massively valuable tool in our filmmaking database. It'll be something that you can know as a filmmaker. I've got 2 days on this location. I'm renting somebody's apartment. It's a high-end penthouse, but I've got 2 days and I've got 70 shots. I know that I can cut 15 to 20 of these shots out and shoot them virtually if I can get this guy to let me scan this part of the room, because all of these actions that I don't need to grab, and then all of a sudden you can functionally shoot within your timeline. As filmmakers, this is really cool, really exciting stuff. Holy shit. Any questions about virtual production? Yeah.
Well, this is coming from someone who's not like very into the, not a filmmaker, not a professional.
Excellent. Well,
But
you came for the breakfast.
I work in the music side.
Oh, sweet. Yes, yes.
But what would be like drawback for lacking better words, or probably what would be the challenges that derive from using this technology?
Yes, virtual production is very much like The best way I would describe it is bad virtual production is like bad visual effects. Because it is, essentially what we're doing in virtual production is we're helping filmmakers by essentially condensing the workflow. So instead of shooting a bunch of stuff, handing it off to your VFX team, and they spend 6 months in post working on it, they're going to spend 6 months in prep, building, and you're going to have everything. It's essentially getting all of that VFX stuff shifted to the front end. And in in there will create the first hurdle is if your VFX team is not good, or if your VFX team is not up to snuff, or if the technology, if they cut corners when it comes to, you know, certain assets, it will definitely show on camera. Because the one thing that you're tricking is the lens, but what you can't trick is the eye. Every filmmaker in the room knows bad visual effects when they see it. So there are high-end effects companies. There are really strong, animators and effects. They're called Unreal generalists in that space. People that have mastered this technology. They come with a cost, and they come, you know, in that space it becomes a little bit more, as a filmmaker you have to kind of figure out, is it worth it to shoot this as a virtual production space, or is this something that it's easier for us to just grab on the day and hope that we're not going to miss these pieces. The add-on component of being able to LiDAR scan, because essentially it's images. It's not stuff that's going to be completely warpable and mappable, but at that point, what you're trying to convince the eye is that this out-of-focus background, while they're picking up the box, is the same one we shot on those days. If you're creating a world in that space, then it's definitely going to be that will be the first hurdle is this effects team up to the task of it? And there are some people that are phenomenal at it. There are some sets on the Unreal Marketplace that cost hundreds of dollars versus tens of dollars. And therein will be the difference, right? Something that will have more functional textures versus something that's just going to be more, you know, if you look at it for too long, you'll get a sense that it's not real. Whereas these ones are like 4K down to the pixel accurate. They cost a little more for that space. So it'll come down, like anything, it'll come down to cost and being able to, there will be, undoubtedly there already is, a run of people that are shooting entirely in virtual production. Those won't necessarily fly so much as the ones that utilize virtual production and nobody could tell. Those will be the ones that will be like, yeah, we saved tens of thousands of dollars by shooting one day in this hotel and doing the rest virtually. That number for the filmmakers is massive, but in the actual production, the audience would not have even noticed or even clued in or cared. So it becomes one of those things of like leaning into the technology too much and trying to do a Mandalorian style production with all these real worlds in there. That's where that hurdle is going to be faced first and foremost. Right. Sweet. Excellent. Any other questions before? All right. Yeah.
The interface between the camera and the background.
Yeah.
Is it a software that can synchronise
Yeah.
the gimbal, like focus and gimbal, like any axis movement? Is there a link? Like is Unreal speaks to another software?
Yes. Yeah. So it's essentially, it gets into techie terms that are beyond my scope, but essentially what it is it's called parallax. So if you point a camera at a still image and you move around, as a human being, your eye shifts and you can kind of see that this world's changing. But if it's a still image, it doesn't change. And that creates this weird kind of like, oh yeah, they're definitely in front of a still image. So the parallax that's created, and you can see it kind of when we did the tour, where this thing is shifting around crazily because all that system cares about is the lens. And it's looking at that lens, it's tracking using camera tracking systems exactly where the center focal point of that lens is, so that it knows of all of this space, this area has to be in perfect alignment with the lens so that we can trick the eye into knowing that this is the spot they're shooting. So as the camera moves, the rest of the space just kind of falls into weird shifting motion because it's irrelevant. It's only focused on that lens. So it's a part of the Unreal, part of the camera tracking system that connects all the tissue in there. But it's based on a series of tracking dots, very similar to motion capture stuff. I think CERT has a stage down at Pinewood where they do training, and there's a virtual production academy for filmmakers that are looking, or people that are looking to get into that space, that'll be opening as well, that really digs into this technology. It's really cool, really tight stuff. But as indie filmmakers, that high-end technology, if it's not available, then you just have to look at it and say, I'm going to replace all of these inserts, easy peasy, shots that you're throwing in for 2 or 3 seconds in your timeline, as opposed to doing an entire scene within that space. Oh, okay, sweet. Now we're cooking. Yes.
So the software is free, but like all the other equipment, like the screens, the camera, what's the minimum that you need to be able to pull something like that?
It's again, it comes down to, from a William F. White perspective, our virtual production angles, because we have invested so much. We are typically, with the LED space, we're playing in the higher end volumes world. So we're dealing with CBS, with Strange New Worlds, which I think just dropped. Star Trek Strange New Worlds is on Paramount Plus or whatever it's on now. And then Netflix, we're dealing with them with Avatar. So those costs are very, very high. Just from an overall perspective, it's an average studio thing is about $60K a day in that realm. But for a low budget side, you can go online and see virtual production stuff that people have done in their garage with like a green screen and an iPhone. Because iPhone, I think it's iPhone, anything that's above iPhone 12 maybe, has camera tracking that can help you do like facial morphing and stuff, and you can actually play in that space for relatively low cost. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I'm not as technically savvy as some of these people here in film, but although this technology here is incredible,
Yes.
it's a very integrated technology, but then I'm going to say what everyone's probably thinking. When you're talking about 200,000 or 2 million,
Oh yeah.
$200,000 to probably 99% of the people here is like $20 million. It's
Oh, yeah.
like a lot of money.
Yes.
So this is almost, as much as it's incredible, it really is incredible
Yeah.
technology. It's almost unusable for the average just Joe Blows trying to get it filmed up. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's why I preface that with this is something that from a virtual production side, you can dip your toes in for that space without having to break the bank, especially when it just comes to for us, our estimation on our budget, we were able to cut out 20 days of production essentially, and we're basically paying $50,000 a day for our production team at a $300,000 budget. So for us, that cost of knowing that we didn't need these inserts in there, but we didn't use LED screens, we didn't use anything other than the green screen component. If we were to virtual produce our background, that would have been far more cost prohibitive.
Suppose somebody that has sort of is doing a low budget film on the high end, this would be incredible.
This technology, we've got a Canadian indie production for 1.2 million telefilm regional funding that's exploring it, and basically the scenario that we've worked out with them is the virtual production screens plus green screen. That virtual production kind of workflow is something that they've had to form. This is what we're seeing here is the premier technology, and then the big thing for me is just when we see that's the immediate takeaway, because I have issues when I talk with our William F. White marketing team is that all we're showing is Mandalorian, and every independent filmmaker doesn't see that in their space. But as someone who's had that experience, to know that virtual production at that level isn't necessary unless you're building a production that's designed for that. But virtual production as an asset where you can literally scan and capture and use those pieces to cut your budget in half, that's kind of the main takeaway for that overall space. Any other virtual production stuff? I'm going to show you one more cool thing. I don't know where we're sitting on time. But so the other thing that we kind of hit as a barrier for a lot of as independent filmmakers is shooting outside on the streets. It's very expensive to shut down a street to get a shot of your lead actor walking from the sidewalk to their car. So in that space, you know, you can look at having to shut down businesses, having to get police patrol, having to have parking set aside for all those support vehicles that you've got in that world. So for me, we made another exciting advancement here in our Toronto space that I'm really excited about from an independent filmmaker perspective, because we have, it's always a weird thing to say, we bought a town. So, you know, for me as an indie filmmaker, having conversations with other indie filmmakers and hearing the stories of like how difficult it was to get this one shot of their people driving into an intersection because, you know, we have to either don't tell the insurance company about it. The insurance talk's not here yet, right? Yes. Yeah. So don't tell the insurance company that we're actually driving into these spaces or anything like that. So you know, there's hurdles that come with that type of production as well. So you know, as William F. White, we've recently made an acquisition, and if you want to open up that, I think there's a street level thing. So that one, yeah. So we bought a town just before we start this here. Anyone watch Jack Reacher on Amazon Prime? The town of, what is it called, Mayberry or whatever the hell it was. This was a town that they built. So Amazon came up from Georgia in the middle of the pandemic and said, we can't shoot in Georgia. We need to build a space out in Canada that can be COVID safe and that we can have control over the environment. So we helped them, and we worked with the Durham region to find a space to build the town to shoot in. What's exciting about this is although they, spoiler alert, burned the town down in the show, the sets are still standing. And what's exciting is that this is a farmer's field, and this is all metal and wood and dirt in the middle of a farmer's field. So you can press play for it. So again, this is one of Canada has a few back lots. Most of them are kind of western towns. This is one of the few ones that actually has a kind of a modern feel to it. There's a couple of New York style towns as well in Vancouver. I believe they go through the town on Street View. There you go. So this is all fake. This is all just metal wood. The streets, the parking, the roads, the intersections, this is all 100% controlled. So as a filmmaker, as you're putting your packages together and you're sitting there like, you know, if you're proposing shooting shooting on a gas station or in a diner or just on the street in general, there's a space that exists here just out in Pickering, just outside of Toronto. I think it's about 40 minutes away from downtown core in there. But where this really makes a difference is when you start looking at driving scenes, you know, being able to do that scene, you know, in the car, being able to have to shut down and police patrol and all these other costs that come with it. It allows filmmakers to have a little bit more money on screen rather than have to like spend so much money to shut down a street, coordinate, do all that stuff, to have that walking from the street or walking from outside the building conversation. So this space has been with us for about a year and a half now. We kind of picked it up just after the space, but we've been able to utilize it for quite a few larger productions. Obviously love it because they can walk in and own everything. But the benefit for me as the low budget indie guy, our studios are typically really costly because we have overhead. It's a massive 100,000 square foot space, heating, HVAC, water, security, all that stuff. This is a farmer's field with metal and wood in it. So if there's a day on an indie production, we have a much better chance of being able to find a number that can work for them to get them out there. And it's saved quite a few filmmakers in that they don't have those added costs of all those extra pieces of, well, we want to get this shot of our lead actor and it's going to cost us $5,000 because this coffee shop wants us, you know, we're going to be shutting down their business for 3 hours because we have a film crew in front of their parking spot. So those type of things, again, become an asset value, a value asset add to your overall production. And what I've been seeing lately is basically we're doing tours, people are doing stills, and people are kind of combining their images that they're taking on the tour with their pitch decks so that they can show that this is something that's readily available and accessible to them in Pickering. So I mean, if you're from out of province, that might be a little bit difficult, but if you're in Toronto, then there's going to be an active push in the next 3 or 4 months to get people out to take a look at the space, because we want people to access it and use it. So again, the top down looks kind of flimsy, wood in a space. But again, from a filmmaker's perspective, one of the big things that we talk about in a lot of my conversations is all that matters is the lens. Does it look like you're on this space? Is it virtual or not? Is the lens being tricked appropriately? And so technology has allowed us. Backlots by no means are new. This is from the Hollywood, Universal Studios. They were doing this back in the 30s. But for Canada, this is one of the fewer, the few that have actually started to actually be available to us out here.
So is it all wired and powered and right? So you have a generator?
Yeah. So what's cool about this, this building right here is a fully functional diner, and fully functional in that it's powered and it's got all, it's got everything in the place. It was because of Amazon, the benefit for Canadian filmmakers, because of Amazon and their green initiative, everything's LED, so it's literally a 6K battery that we can park and plug in, and that entire diner set lights up. This building at the far corner there, if you're a Jack Reacher viewer, is the police station. So it's got a police station, jail cell, boardroom, and again, one of 2 buildings, and there's also somewhere in one of these facades, there's also a barber shop. For some reason, they had to build a barber shop. So there's that building, the police station, and a barber shop are all actual functional internal spaces as well, sets. So you can sit in the barber shop, look out the window at the town, get those shots through there. And because of the LED wiring in place, it's literally battery packs and whatnot. The shows that have shot on here for reference, there's an Ontario Lottery Corporation commercial where there's a bunch of confetti flying everywhere, and that was shot all on the back lot, entirely on the back lot, with the exception of the 2 final inserts of the town. And again, it's when it's empty, it's empty. It's great. Like, I've gone up there and done a tour, and then just had meetings and lunch in like the main. It's really surreal to get it to actually be out there for it. All right. Any questions about technology? Is that what this was about? Just any questions about what essentially what I would love for you guys all to take away from this is do not hesitate. Like, whites is scary, like you saw. This is a hundreds of billions of dollars company, but my world is indie film. And I've been on that stage. I've been on this backlot. I've been into our studios, and I know the equipment like the back of my hand. So if there's the potential for, if you have an interest in a career and you want to develop, and there's certain things that we can do to help. The big thing is obviously with virtual production. How do I get onto that stage? And right now, what we're seeing is there's a push. We're seeing a push into development or into investment in that technology as directors, because if Netflix is coming up and shooting Avatar, or CBS is shooting Strange New Worlds, where are they getting the directors? The directors have to come up from LA because they haven't had the exposure of this technology yet. And so for us, we've created things like the Virtual Production Academy. We're partnering with the Directors Guild of Canada, who are doing, actually right now, or this afternoon, they're taking a bunch of their directors through the process of virtual production for the purposes of making them tech knowledgeable about this equipment. As indie filmmakers, what is it going to be, like how do we coordinate and how do we figure out how to access this technology? As an indie filmmaker, I know you're going to have to piecemeal 5 or 6 different funds together for any project. When you get into virtual production, Epic Mega Grants is a thing that exists to help people access this technology. So virtual production, the cost of accessing it might actually be offset by an Epic mega grant to say, like, this young filmmaker has made a strong case to try virtual production. They're going to use, go on the stage for a day. This grant helps cover the costs in that world. So it really comes down to figuring out at the end of the day, what is the skill set that you're going to, and this is what my conversations, try to focus on. At the end of the day, what are you walking away with that's going to be tangible? And at that, when I say the word tangible, I don't mean your project. It's incredibly easy to shoot a movie. Everyone can do it. You can grab a camera on your phone and go out and shoot a movie right now. But what do you get out of it? How do you walk away, especially from that experience? You're going to dedicate 5 years of your life to a short film, and you're going to pull all your money together, and you're going to sell a car, and you're going to shoot this short film. That short film may screen in 3 or 4 festivals, but what does that film do for you? In that world, I look at it and say, okay, well, you invested your life. That's awesome. The short film played a couple festivals. Now what it's done is it's positioned you in things like the Canada Council for the Arts. Now you're recognized as a filmmaker. Now there's a fund available for you to continue practicing it without going into your own pocket, without going into debt. That short film, let's say you worked with us in that space and you learned how to be in technocrane, or you got an experience on a technocrane. Now, when you're pitching that music video to that filmmaker, you're one of the few people who have access or had experience on that crane, so that they can trust you to know that you're going to know what you're doing with that piece. We've seen that with a lot of my clients that I work with are commercial filmmakers, people that work in the commercial industry, and they get really excited about, we're pitching on these large Pepsi bids, but we keep getting beat out by these bigger companies because they've got the more experience. So this young guy, just a bit of an anecdotal here, the young guy makes a short film, and that short film gets one screening, and he gets all depressed because he's like, I have to play in commercials because no one wants to watch my movies. And the realities are that's possibly true, but he made a short film. It was screened. So we set him up. We walked him over. We looked at the Canada Council for the Arts, which is a national fund that recognizes filmmakers. So by having made a film and had being screened, he received the thumbs up from Canada Council that you're eligible to come to us for money. So then that filmmaker works with us and says, like, I want to create a short film about 3 minutes long, but I want to do it on a techno crane so I can show in my reel that I have the experience of that space. So a 3-minute short film, little dance bit, but then in the commercial world, in the other life that he leads outside of the art space, he now has evidence that they're capable of doing this level of production, and that helps grow him on that end. And so for us, it always got back to what's tangible about this project. At the end of the day, the short film that arguably the short film that he made with the Canada Council support didn't do as well as the one that he thought was a nightmare, bad mistake for him in the beginning. But what it did do is equip him with a skill set that helps his career move forward in that space. And at the end of the day, again, that's how I work. That's what I with William F. White want to do, is work with you as an individual. Projects come and go, but what can we do to help you kind of take each step going forward? Is it 10:30 when I'm rapping? Or was that 10?
Yeah, we're wrapping now.
Oh, sweet. I thought I went way over. Excellent. Right on. Appreciate it. Don't hesitate to reach out. My email is jeffs, Jeffs, @whites.com. I still have the mic. If you want to, take a tour, do a talk, like, again, Zoom calls have been a lifesaver for that. Awesome. I don't know, is this work?
Yeah, because it's all on the live stuff. It's not for in here.
Sweet.
Thanks, Greg. That was awesome. I don't know if you're going to be around at all. Like, we're going to end up having a little break here. But just before we have our little break, I just wanted to let everybody know that I have worked with Greg on several shorts, features, and all that stuff, and it has been a lifesaver for us as far as money goes. We've been able to pull things off on really low budgets, and I'm talking about budgets that you're going to be familiar with, you know, the really low stuff. But we've been able to make the films look like they've had budgets of like $5-10 million because of what we've done and what they've been able to help us with, and how they've been able to save us, you know, money on lights and on any of the gear and stuff that we need. And like, there's been times where we've panicked and be like, oh, we need something, you know, and they come through. I know we just did something in the fall, and we had, I think, one of your vans, and you know, so we had, like, I've actually used them a lot, or my team has used them a lot. So it really does save you a lot, and don't hesitate to kind of come and say, okay, this is what we're working with, because, you know, they'll find something that's going to help you out and is going to save you money in the end. And that's, you know, kind of what we're all working with, our budgets and stuff, trying to save as much money as we possibly can, but look, you know, so amazing. So from a first-hand point of view, like, that's, I know exactly, you know, what everybody's doing, and with this here, they've helped us so much along the way for, I don't know, like the past like 5 years of stuff we've done, and it has been a lifesaver. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the Gmail address
Yeah.
again?
Yeah, so my first initial G, and my last name, Jeffs, J-E-F as in Frank, F as in Frank, S, @whites.com.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, you know, send the emails and your, you know, budgets and all that sort of stuff, because it will help out in the end, and in the end for you. And I mean, we keep going back, and, you know, with, you know, the more that we do and the more stuff that goes on, it's more and more helpful. So they played a big role in all the stuff that we've done, and been so helpful. So, you know, take advantage of that. So anyways, we're going to have a bit of a break right now. So the next panel is going to be at roughly 10:45-ish. We'll see how, you know, we could be a little bit flexible on our times and stuff here today. So you can, you know, enjoy the weather outside for the next little bit. We've got, I think there's still coffee out there, and we've got water too that we can send out there as well, that you can grab. But go take a little bit of time and talk to each other, and enjoy some weather for a little bit while we get set up for the next one. Thank you.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You got living with Mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose? The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The World's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You got living with mom and taking responsibility.
World's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You got living with mom and taking responsibility.
World's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You got living with mom and taking responsibility.
World's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary? You got living with mom and taking responsibility.
World's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You go living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You go living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You go living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You go living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things.
Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things.
Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things.
Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things.
Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things.
Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You call living with mom and taking responsibility.
The world's your oyster. What we got to lose?
I haven't been on a date since, Jesus, since December?
Causes genotoxical damage.
The Monsanto papers showed us all those things. Is all of this necessary?
You call living with
I will
So smiley.
do a quick introduction here.
Okay,
Just wait till everyone sits down
for sure.
and it's all yours. Just waiting for everybody to take their seats. For those of you that are on the live stream, everyone's just taking their seats here.
I kind of want us to move a little bit so I can see everybody's face. If you want to move, yeah, a little bit, so that I can see everybody's face a little bit, yeah. Karen, can you maybe frame yourself a little bit? Yeah, awesome.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, welcome back, everybody, to our second session here. I'm not going to do a big introduction on this, other than the fact that whenever we travel and go places, I always get asked the same question from people when they find out I'm from Toronto. They always say, "What's Toronto like?" And the first thing that I always say is, Toronto is the most culturally diverse city now in the world. And we really need to take advantage of that fact and learn how to take advantage of that special trait that we now have in the world. So this panel is hopefully going to help us learn a little bit more about that and how to take advantage of those things. So we'll pass it off here, and off you go, and I'll take my seat.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing?
Good.
Good, awesome. My name is Evangeline Chima, and I am the Executive Director of Black Mentorship, Inc., an organization that is fostering the diverse advancement, growth of Black professionals. And we do that through mentorship, education, skills building. Our hope, our vision is to level the leadership platform. The leadership spectrum doesn't look anything like the Canada that we know. I'm sure you can all relate to that. And through the work that we're doing, we're hoping to change that. And this is why I'm very interested in this session today, where we will be discussing the challenges that so many diverse people, racialized people, foreigners, new people, immigrants, face in the film industry. Full disclosure, I know nothing about the film industry. Nothing, zero. But don't worry, this is why we have this knowledgeable panelists here to address questions that we have. But before we get into it, a little bit of housekeeping. I will have our knowledgeable, impeccable speakers introduce themselves, no random order. After that, we will take the questions that you have. And once we're done, they have generously agreed to answer any questions that you have even after the session. All right? And they're also so generous. They also whispered to me that they are open to share their contact information with you. So when we finish, grab them, right? Okay. Without any much further ado, Patricia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia Scarlett. I'm the founder and CEO of the Media Business Institute. The Institute is focused on the business aspects of film and television, so we offer training specifically around business affairs and television sales and distribution. We have an in-house production arm that produces documentary and children's programs, and the people who take our courses, we give them an opportunity to work on our proprietary productions. That's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Farhan Moradi. I am a writer-director based out of Toronto. And And I wrote and directed a film that's playing tonight called Tehranto, which is a Iranian-Canadian romantic comedy. So come check it out.
Hi everyone, I'm Katon Douglas, Executive Director of BIPOC TV and Film. We represent Black, Indigenous, and people of color working in the screen sector. We focus a lot on advocacy, addressing racial inequity across the industry and seeing how those systemic challenges have really curtailed the progress for people from racialized communities across Canada who are trying to enter the sector and advance in it as well. So we provide training opportunities, mentorship. I think for me, the thing that I love the most about the work that we do is that we provide a community, a safe space for people who are Indigenous, people who are racialized, to form new networks. So we could really lean on each other as well. In 2020, we launched a online database, which is bilingual, called Hire BIPOC, and that's a way for us to connect employers with Black, Indigenous, and people of color who work in the sector. Today, Hire BIPOC has over 8,000 users, and it's been used by production companies in Canada, in the US, companies that are shooting here from the UK as well. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here today to talk about how we could really help people, in really growing and working in this wonderful entertainment industry.
Amazing. See, I told you not to worry that I don't know anything about the film industry. Okay. One thing, I understand that we have virtual audience. So if you do have questions, virtual audience, please send your question to contacts@offa.ca. And I believe Maddie, is Maddie in the room? Will help bring your question across, or maybe I will get my son, who's sitting over there, to help us with that. Anyways, let's get to it. Patricia.
Yes.
So the media and the film industry, they've been accused of telling a single story.
Right.
All right? And so one of the first questions that I have in my notebook is, how can we diversify our views, so that other people's culture can be told through the lens?
Well, I don't think it's just one solution to the problem. I think there are a bunch of things that need to be addressed in order to bring about the change. I think for so many years we have been influenced by Hollywood and that model of what audiences want. And there's an old adage that says nobody knows. And I think we've all seen so many films that fall outside of the Hollywood model that have found audiences all over the world. So I think a starting point would be, we need gatekeepers, we need a change in the model that we have, and we need more diversity at the decision-making level. A good story is a good story is a good story. It doesn't matter what the cast looks like. And we've seen examples of this. If you think about Black Panther, yes, it was a Marvel Media comic that the film was based on, but just the same, it was an all-Black cast. And from here to Timbuktu, the film did very, very well. I mean, China, I think, was the biggest market for it. It did very, very well. So it doesn't have to be that kind of a blockbuster. I think smaller films that are well cast with stories that connect at a human level still have the potential to do well wherever they are screened. It's just a question of finding the people who have the desire and understanding that audiences, wherever they are in the world, will connect to stories that are human stories. And that's what we're doing in telling, stories through film, is here's a situation or something someone else has experienced that is human, and people connect to that.
Amazing, absolutely. I think that amazing. That well said. And you're very right, and I like what you said. It's a matter of finding the people, so the directors, the filmmakers, who will be willing and open to receive this content. And so how do we change their mind? How do we achieve that mental shift?
Well, I think some changes have begun, certainly here in Canada and in the United States, but it's we're talking about centuries of exclusion and centuries of a mindset that said that only these kinds of stories could be told. So it's not going to, the change will not come about overnight. It's going to be a slow process. But I think with organizations like BIPOC TV and others, the Black Screen Office, the Indigenous Screen Office, that are holding people accountable and will do so consistently, we will see the change come about. The decision makers have to change. I think when you have lived in a bubble, that your world's very limited. And I've often personally observed that because we are not in positions of power, we have to make it our business to know about what's going on in the wider world. When you are in a position of power, it doesn't matter. Your world is your world. Your level of interest in those who are on the margins is slim to none. And I think that's what we've been experiencing.
Thank you. If you can hand it over to Ferrin. Hi, Ferrin. I watched Black Powder and Guilt, one of your short movies that you directed. So by the way, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
I'm curious though, what made you choose the name Black Powder and Guilt?
Well, the movie deals with the guilt that this child faces surrounding the disappearance of his younger brother and how that guilt haunts him into adulthood. And I think that for a lot of people, there are these things that they've done as kids that they kind of latch onto, that they don't necessarily realize, it wasn't exactly their fault because they were kids when they did certain things, but for whatever reason, these things can shape who we are as adults. And the film also explores this obsession that this child has with his father's rifle. And he kind of sees this as like, oh, well, that's like the key to adulthood is being able to handle a rifle. For me, the key to adulthood was like having literal keys, because like adults had keys, kids didn't have keys, so that was my obsession. And I think that for like a lot of people, there's these things that when they're kids, they're like, oh, adults have cars, so when I have a car, I'm an adult, or adults have like X, that makes them an adult. So the whole movie explores this idea of what makes you an adult and how the guilt that you face as a child might lead into adulthood.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. As an Iranian filmmaker who came to Canada perhaps when you were young, right?
Well, I was born
here?
Yeah, I was born here, yeah, but my parents came just a couple years before I was born.
Oh.
So I guess, cultural influence in the home was very strong.
Absolutely.
We weren't even allowed to speak English in the home. It was like Persian, and that's it.
I wish I did that with my boys.
It's not too late. Start tonight. Just be like, no.
Okay, I'll start working on it.
Yeah.
But you said something very interesting. As kids, what we see is what we emulate, right? So it is so important that we have a representation of our career dreams, for example, in film industry. And so for you, your parents, were they filmmakers? How did you get into filmmaking? So for anybody in the room who is not in that dream, how can they step in?
So my parents were not filmmakers, and we didn't know anybody in the film industry. So what I decided one day, you know what, I think this is something I want to do. It was probably a little bit of a shock to my parents because, like in a lot of immigrant families, the idea is like, look, we made a lot of sacrifices to get here, so we need you to go for something that might be more tangible, right? Like we need you to go be like a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor. Like these are the typical things that you face. I was lucky enough that my parents, when I told them that I wanted to do this, they recognized that I had a passion for it. So I didn't have to directly convince them because openly they were like pretty supportive, but I could tell like deep down there was probably some apprehension and some worry. But I was able to push through, and a lot of that is thanks to you know, some sacrifices that other filmmakers have made, especially like racialized filmmakers. Because when I was going into the industry, especially back then, there was very few opportunities available for people like me, right? And even just seeing names in the credits was enough for me to be like, oh my God, there's like a guy with a name similar to mine who's like the grip on this film. Maybe I can make it too, you know? So now I'm working with a group of other filmmakers to actually go to high schools and tell students, especially high schools with high immigrant populations, high black populations, high indigenous populations, to be like, guys, there's like tons of real opportunities here for us. Like, it's not this like crapshoot thing. It's very tangible, it's very real, and there's money on the table. And to one last thing to your point about Black Panther, for years there was this like notion within the film industry that women and black people don't sell superhero movies. And then Black Panther came out and made over $1 billion, and Wonder Woman made over $1 billion. So a lot of these like old hats at these like film industries are film production companies are kind of getting pushed out, and we're getting more and more people to come in to be like, no, like we can tell stories about other groups, and because there's so few of those stories especially, like they're going to make a lot of money. And that's what people are starting to realize.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That's absolutely true. But I know it must have been daunting for you to want to venture, if you can pass the mic, for you to want to venture into a film industry that there is no representation, nobody that looks like you, basically, maybe very few people. And so that brings me to this question, Katie. Viola Davis in her speech, and I believe it's Amy's speech, she said, the only thing that separates women of color from anyone else is opportunity. Would you agree with that?
Completely agree with that, you know. And in our industry specifically, I entered this industry back in 2012. I really started to do this work, which coincidentally is the same year that BIPOC TV and Film was founded. And I think for me, I didn't feel like a stranger to the industry because fortunately I grew up with family members who were working in it. So as a kid, both of my aunts were director and producers, making a lot of indie films, and specifically films with a social justice lens about women's issues, LGBTQ issues, and immigration as well. So I grew up knowing that is the possibility for me. And also, I grew up in my family with a lot of audacity built into me that we can be anything, we can be anybody. And another thing that was really fortunate for me is that I grew up half of my life in the Caribbean, so where I saw people in all different roles who look like me. So that's one of the things. And then just moving here, I really got to see the systemic issues that we face through a very unique lens as an immigrant, as someone who grew up in a predominantly black family, in a social justice-oriented family as well. And seeing that really what's separating us is not a lack of talent, you know. We are storytellers historically, you know. And that's how we retain our history, through oral storytelling. That's so innate to us. So the only thing that's really separating us from these things is the opportunity, it's the chance to do so. It's someone stepping out of the way to make that possible. So I agree with Patricia, like we really do need to shift who the decision makers are. And another thing that we need to contest is the notion of a Canadian story. And how we define Canadian content or CanCon as well. What's built into that? And a lot of times for so long, we haven't been part of that definition of what the Canadian narrative is. And we've been here. in the case of Indigenous people, they've been here for such a long time, but have never really been considered by the mainstream as part of that Canadian narrative. You know, so I think that's one thing that we really need to shift right now. I know for me, I remember pitching. I started out in documentary. And I know that a lot of my peers face that when they would pitch a story, they're being asked, how will Canadians relate to this? And there's always this fictional white couple in Saskatchewan that we are supposed to relate to. Apparently, their names are Mr. and Mrs. McGillicuddy. And we're often told this asked this by decision makers. How will this story relate to this fictional family? And that question is never reversed. You know, I grew up watching Friends, watching so many American shows, even here, all of the Anne of Green Gables, watching them, you know? And the question has never been, how can I, a Caribbean immigrant, relate to this story? Or how can Black people in Nova Scotia who've been here for centuries, how can they relate to this story? Is this story Canadian then? There's never that question. So I think we really need to interrogate why that is. And then that's when we'll start to see the shift. It's what we need. We need a cultural shift. We need a mindset shift. And then we also need to change who these decision makers are. And the last thing I'll say to that, I remember one of our major production companies two of our major broadcasters now have people of color on their development team. And I'm hearing from people who are pitching to them now and saying what it feels like to walk into a room and see a Black woman, to see an Asian woman, to see someone who is queer and trans sitting at the other side of that table. And that is where the power lies. You know, so that's my long answer.
Absolutely, well said. Actually, still hold on to that.
Okay. I usually have a lot to say. I also come from a very verbose family.
That is amazing. So lucky you have aunties when you were growing up, or uncles, or somebody in the film industry that you can perhaps go to for questions. A lot of people, a lot of BIPOC people, people of color, Indigenous, they don't have that. And if they are here, or maybe virtual, or hopefully watch later, talk to us. How can we get into it?
One of the major barriers in this sector is access to key networks, to the people who have the power, who have the resources to advance your career and your projects. And because we've been locked out for so long, I think there's a poem by Naira Waheed that says, the beauty of my people is so, and she just speaks about it. And I just think that we have the ability to create our own spaces, to create beauty, to create possibilities. And what we've done is create our own networks. So BIPOC TV and Film was founded 10 years ago because Natalie Yonglai, whose family is from Trinidad, but she's Chinese, and she's also of Chinese heritage, she had started out in the industry, and she was looking for mentorship. She was looking for a community, and it was very difficult to find that. So she created one. And we see that with the emergence of so much of that throughout the decades. We see that in Indigenous communities. The creation of the Indigenous Screen Office is so significant, a way for them to truly claim their narrative sovereignty and to show that we can create things for us, by us as well. So I think it's the creation of our own network. So I often tell people, I'm like, find your family, find your people, share with each other, build with each other, and that's where you'll see the magic. And what has happened, because we've done that, we've created this mass that's so hard to ignore right now, and now these closed door networks are coming to us. Now they're knocking on our door to be, how can we have access to the resources that you have, to the talent that you have. And that took years of work, but that took us leaning into each other. That took us, I know so many people, I have so many people on speed dial in WhatsApp chats, for when the days are tough. And I think that's what we've done, so we're the reverse is, and it's hard, we can't be ignored now. So I always tell people, I'm like, find your people and build with them. And Ava DuVernay has a quote where she says, I think she's talking about, like, if we're building, it can't just be for you, What we're doing is for all of us to thrive. So that's usually my thing. It's for us to, and social media has made that even more possible. So we have a Facebook group that is closed to BIPOC only, and we have almost 3,000 people in that Facebook group, who are active, who are sharing, saying, I have a job, I need advice, why do we do this, And that would be my number one advice. And then I say, if you have it in you, go to everything. I'm like, from the first 2 years of me being in the industry, I'm an introvert. I'm here, like, inside. My anxiety is going off right now.
You, me both.
It's going off. But I went to everything, and I remember I had my hair in a big afro. Every time it was a different color, I took up space everywhere. And I went out, I made sure I was visible. And sometimes it took a playlist before it, mostly Beyonce. It took a playlist before it, either Beyonce or some 90s dancehall, or that's what I listen on my way here.
Amazing.
But like to do that, to get and know that you belong in that space, and how dare anybody think otherwise about it.
Absolutely. Amazing. That is really wonderful. Be bold. Don't be afraid to step in, step into that space. It's what I'm taking away from that. Years ago.
And sorry, I would say also that there is hunger for your stories.
There is.
There is so much. People are looking for bold, daring, new narratives. They want your story. This is where it is. And because Canada now, because of how the marketplace has exploded, and it's now global, it's not just about reaching a Canadian audience, that Canadian audience that is defined by those 2 white people in Saskatchewan. It's no longer that. These broadcasters, these production companies and distributors, they're looking for things that will sell internationally.
Absolutely.
And we are the global majority.
Absolutely.
So just know that.
That is, you guys hearing? You listening? You don't have your pen and paper? Are you observing everything? Okay. I know Patricia's been itching. She's been like, I want to get into that one. Give it to me. So this is your space. Go ahead.
I just wanted to pick up on what Kaden was saying about finding your group, your tribe, so to speak. I started in 2008. I was trying to put together the financing for a documentary feature that would explore the roots and the evolution of the Rastafarian movement around the world. So I start off with one proposal. I'm basically financing the development myself. I run around to all of the broadcasters, and they invariably say, well, why would Canadians be interested in this? I make the argument that the most famous Rastafarian, Bob Marley, is known from here to Timbuktu. They're still not getting it. So I decide to finance shooting a little trailer. Vision Television gave me some money for development. And I went to Jamaica, shot a trailer, came back, ran around to everyone. They said, oh, the host is great. We love her, but we want somebody with a bigger face and a bigger name. So I start over again. By this time, no one's given me 5 cents for development. I'm financing all of this myself. And the Film Board was the last organization I spoke to. And by then, I managed to secure Bob Marley's granddaughter, who's his eldest grandchild, and she looks a lot like him. And so I start again. I go back and I shoot a trailer with her. Cut a little teaser together, come back, I go to the NFB, and they start the dance again. And I simply collected my things and said, I will no longer darken your doors, I will figure it out. So I called my parents, and they said, okay, how much do you need? And they gave me the first chunk of money. And the urgency at the time that I called them was because the Smithsonian had just mounted the first ever major exhibit on the Rastafarian culture. It was a first of its kind. It was only supposed to be up for 3 months, so I had a very short window to go and shoot this. And I called them up. They were very enthusiastic, and so I got some money from them, from my parents and my brothers and sisters, and I went and I shot it. And that was how the film started. And then I went to Banff on my own, ran into a friend who was a broadcaster who said, look, I still have some money left in my envelope, you can have it. And I just pieced and patched it together. It didn't look like anything in terms of the mainstream Canadian funding model. And it was fight, fight, fight all along the way. Tax credits were denied me, fought them. Took 18 months, but I got it. And so the point of the story is sometimes you can't just wait. If it's something that you want to do, you've got to figure it out. Go create your own model and find the support of people who see your vision and believe in you, and just get it done. Ryan Singh, my colleague who is in here, was one of the people as well who, as I pieced and patched the financing together, he came in as an investor and also helped me move the project along. And I got it done, pain and suffering, but I got it done.
Wow, wow, amazing.
I absolutely love that film.
Yeah.
I've been trying to find it since then, so now I'm going to talk to you after.
Amazing. See, you guys are addressing my questions, and honestly, I did not share my questions with them. But they're making me feel, oh my God, she just finished addressing this next question that I have, so what else am I going to ask? But you know, the biggest challenge is to get started. So I'm going to go to you, Farin, because you got started without knowing anybody in the film industry. And I know so many of us, I wanted to be an actress.
It's not too late.
Yes, you inspired me when you said you started, into film industry after teaching for 20 plus years or 30. Exactly, so I have hope. Watch and see. But talk to us, break it down. How can I or anybody here go into this film industry?
So for me, I think it wasn't that long ago. It was 12 years ago. But the landscape from 12 years ago to now has changed so much. Even just the last 5 years has changed so much. When I did it, I went to film school. I actually didn't get into the film school I wanted right away. So I did a 1-year program, did that, and then leveraged the connections that I made to get onto film sets, learn more, reapply to film school, got in. And then from there, made sure to make connections with people so that when we were done, right, just based on how well people knew each other and how good your work was and how good of a friend you were to people, they were more likely to recommend you for stuff. So I kind of built that network that I didn't have. Now it's changed completely. Now you can go on YouTube and watch hours and hours of tutorials on how to film something, how to edit something, how to and gear is so much cheaper and so much more accessible now. You can shoot shorts on your phone. You know what I mean? When I was a kid, that wasn't an option. So, and you hear all these stories of J.J. Abrams, for example, making short films when he was a kid. People, especially BIPOC folk, wouldn't have had the means to just shoot a short when they were 9 years old, 10 years old, right? So, so now you can really find these free resources online, make these things, or even if you can't film something, download a movie and recut it and cut your own sizzle reels or whatever. And then like you were saying, find your networks, because now those networks exist, but 12 years ago, a lot of those networks weren't there. And that actually reminded me, there's something Fanon says about colonized folk, that colonization seeks to find these differences between communities and really accentuate them and divide people. So groups like BIPOC TV and Film are great because it helps reunite people. Like when I went to Banff a couple weeks ago, there were all these really great like BIPOC group chats popping up, BIPOC mixers, so people were meeting each other. Yeah, BIPOC House. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. So these groups, I think that now these communities are coming together and really banding together to be like, no, like we deserve to have our voices heard. And even to what you were saying about tax credits and stuff, like I don't know if people realize this, but most of these Canadian production companies and broadcasters, they get a lot of public funding. It's like taxes, right? And when you look at the demographics of Canada, it's more than just that couple in Saskatchewan, right? Like you have tons of BIPOC Canadians that are paying their taxes. So if they're paying their taxes and a percentage of that money is coming from BIPOC voices, then why isn't that being reflected in where that money is going, right? So for me, it's not enough to just be like, oh, please give me a bit of this money, right? And if NFB keeps closing the door, that's not enough. And they're starting to realize that it's not about giving us opportunities, it's about giving us what's ours. Because we make money, we pay taxes into that, and that tax money has to come back to us.
I say amen to that. Can we pause a little bit? Because I'm looking at the time and I know that our audience are itching. They have lots of questions. And so let me turn around and find out if we have any questions from the audience.
Before you, I just wanted to say a piece, just to what you're saying.
Just please hold your thought.
Just about, that's where the accountability piece comes in now. That about in 2020, I decided that I'm not going to do the ABCs of racism anymore. We all know that it's a problem. We all see the impact of it. Now we're here, we're at the point of solutions and holding ourselves and others accountable around it. And we have to hold these major industry playmakers, especially those that are tied to government in that way. We have to hold them accountable like that and not allow them to prescribe what the solution is to us. BIPOC TV and Film, we take a heavy stand that no solution should be created for us without us being at the table.
Absolutely.
That we need to be there. And if someone chooses to go forward with something, we will publicly contest it. To say, okay, you cannot do that. That doesn't go far enough for us. With Bill C-11, our community asking for specific language in the bill to ensure that we are included in that way and that there are provisions for us in the bill. When we look at when CBC announced their diversity commitments last year, we had questions about that again to hold and say like, all right, we've seen it. You've listed out what you're going to do. Now we're going to come to you every few months. Where are you now in the process? What have you done? And we're seeing that with reports coming up from the Black Screen Office. We've seen studies coming from the Indigenous Screen Office, from the Racial Equity Screen Office out in Vancouver, really pushed a lot of the advocacy for about 8 months or more to get that audit of Knowledge Network out in BC, you know, and to show the really ridiculous way that we have been shut out of the system. That we're seeing that now that we are asking for the data. We need race-based data, because if we're not counted, if it's not counted, then it's not seen, and it's just our stories, and it's easier to gaslight us and to call us paranoid. But we need to get the hard data. We need to be asking those questions, and I have no problem doing that. You know, I have no problem doing that.
Can I ask you a question on that? Because yes, very few people have no problem doing that. But when you are the only one all the time, and when you are trying and trying, you know, how do you keep that hope up? How do you keep pushing when all you are getting is no.
We're not the only one, though. What has been beautiful in the past 2 years is that there are these amazing advocacy organizations run by Black, Indigenous, and people of color across the country who we are in these spaces. When I saw recently there was a National Art Summit in Ottawa, and so many of us being in these spaces in each of the rooms. And sometimes if our organization is the only one at a meeting holding an institution accountable, I go in there and I say, we are not here by ourselves. We are here with the support of so many others. When we send out an advocacy letter, we ensure that we have all these different organizations signing on in solidarity. So we show that we are not alone anymore.
We are not alone. We are not alone.
You know, so that's the key
I know
part.
you have a question. We're not alone. Go ahead, sir. Thank you.
First of all, thank you all so much, a wonderful panel, and especially this tie between advocacy and representation, really speaking my language. So thank you, first of all. My question is, in terms of, you mentioned earlier that, you know, as people of color, we're often coming from a deficit of representation that dates back centuries. And my question for you is, as you're navigating these waters, and you are, in some cases, seeking resources from people who can help leverage opportunities for you. I often see in America where I live, there's often a reactionary, toxic tribalism, right? When people of color are saying, hey, let us be represented, we need to be represented too. Kind of like fish in water can't see that they've been represented. How do you, when you are seeking resources, often from people, how do you navigate that conversation in a solution-oriented way that doesn't create a reactionary, adversarial relationship from the people from whom you need the resources from? And activate that, what I call toxic tribalism, because they perceive what we're doing as hyper-tribal.
I like that. Do me a favor if you can take a few minutes so that I want everybody to touch on that.
That's a huge one. We face a lot of backlash. We even face threats to our careers, to our livelihoods as well. And that's something that as an organization we haven't really spoken about, but we've just recently started that, to speak about the type of emails that we receive and the DMs and so on. And I remember a couple years ago there was a National Post article where a few legacy filmmakers across Canada expressed their racist concerns about them losing their privileges and what they feel entitled to. I don't think that's going to go away. What we need to ensure is that their power dissipates, and that the decision makers, the ultimate decision makers, that we are in constant dialogue with them and doing what we can to decrease that influence over what they're doing. Telefilm has been remarkable in that way. We've seen the Canadian Media Fund take really huge stances. When our community spoke out about a statement that was made at the Canadian Screen Awards this year, and where a white filmmaker said that anybody has a right to tell Black stories, essentially said that. We, like, collectively amongst us as equity-seeking organizations, specifically Black-led organizations, wrote statements calling that out and requesting meetings with the Canadian Academy to really address that issue. But it was the support from key institutions. That's what was amazing, that the Canadian Screen Academy stood by us, that the CMF released a statement, that Telefilm released a statement in solidarity with us. So for me, I see that's the old guard. Those days are dying out. They'll continue to do that, you know. So, and it's frustrating, but I could have some optimism because I could see that there's a lot of pushback, not just at the grassroots level, but in those major institutions as well.
Amazing.
I'll just pass it on.
Thank you.
So I've heard concerns from friends of mine who are are white, and they might have been like old classmates of mine from Sheridan, who say things like, oh, well, like now that telefilm has these opportunities for BIPOC filmmakers, like I feel like I'm being left out. Like now I feel like I don't get an opportunity to make something, blah, 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 blah. But to me, it's like you shouldn't be looking at this like BIPOC filmmakers are taking your spot. What you should be looking at is, for years, nepotism and the same like group of 5 friend groups have been holding the jobs of everybody. So BIPOC filmmakers, a lot of them got together and they're like, no, enough's enough. Like we're also paying our taxes. We are owed a percentage of this, right? So if you're now angry that you're not getting spots, don't get angry at the like BIPOC filmmakers who are coming in and trying to make their way with almost no connections. Get mad at that group of like 10 old white men who keep getting all the telefilm funding every year for the last like 20 years, right? Like that article that you were talking about, there's a lot of people in that. So to break it down for people who don't know about this, telefilm went through and changed around some of their requirements for movies that could get made and get funding. And it wasn't even like across the board. It was like, oh, we're gonna try to have like X percentage be more representative of the like authentic Canadian population, right? And what ended up happening was there was a group of people who were used to getting funding. Like they would just go to the door and be like, hey, I'm making a movie. Telefilm would be like, great, here's your check. Go make your shitty movie, right? And a lot of them are. And what happens is when it's the same group of 5, 10 people who are making these movies, they all end up the same, right? So when you're making all these movies that all end up the same on an international platform, right? It's no longer about this couple in Saskatchewan and how they relate to the movie, right? It's about a couple in Jamaica, a couple in Iran, a couple in like China, wherever, that's like watching these movies and being like, this doesn't relate to me, I don't care, right? But when you're making these movies that are a little more culturally diverse, right, then you have a diverse population around the world who are a little more interested.
And that's true. I went to Turkey recently and I was so surprised to see a lot of Nigerians living there. So our world, not just Canada, is really becoming, diverse, and we need to reflect that in the stories that we tell. So go ahead.
Well, for me, I just keep it simple. I'm a taxpayer in this country. I grew up here. My parents worked here, aunts, uncles, etc. And since these are public funds, I feel they should be divided equitably. It's not more complicated than that. That has not historically been the case, and we are now at a stage of trying to right that whole process.
Thank you. I know you have a question, right? I saw you raise your hand.
My original question was actually asked in a follow-up by you. How do you stay motivated when you keep getting hit with no's, especially from your own community? Your story about the NFB was so heartbreaking. It made me very, very angry. But as another question, I guess, we spoke earlier about having someone in a panel that is BIPOC or queer or is from another marginalized group. I want to ask, now that we've progressed further in the discussion about racial diversity or any type of diversity, how do we fight against tokenization and only doing the bare minimum of having one person in that room?
She's like, bring it out, bring it out, bring it out.
And just fighting for more inclusivity and intersectionality. Oh my gosh.
There's so much work to be done along that. I reference a lot the landmark research that the Black Screen Office has been doing with their Being Seen project. And they really break it down. They create some directives for different stakeholders in the industry to look at, to ask themselves questions around casting, around your casting decisions, around who you have on your crew, thinking about the story as well, imaginative Imaginative produced a really great document a couple of years ago called On-Screen Protocols and Pathways, how to work with Indigenous communities, how to engage with them respectfully as well. And I think these are the key resources for filmmakers right now. Black Screen Office also recently released their Being Counted report. So I think that we're starting to see really, real tangible solutions coming out of this, because this work is a lot of unlearning to do as well. And even for us as racialized creators, there's a lot that we've internalized that we need to address too. Also because we saw the same type of media where this is how an Asian family is portrayed on screen. This is how Iranians are shown on screen and how they're viewed through the media as well. So we've internalized all of that. So I think it's using these tools to really re-educate ourselves and really just surrounding yourself with people who are different, you know. The books you read, the media you watch. Two of my favorite shows this year were like a drama and a comedy from India. You know, I love it. One is called Made in Heaven. It's on Amazon Prime. And I loved everything. One, I love big flashy weddings, and every episode had one. So that's what got me. And then it's just this beautiful story, but seeing queer representation in an Indian series, that was something I'd never seen before, you know? So I think it's really just broadening our perspectives and seeing what we take in as media. That's part of it. And then making sure if you're making a film and you have people from a certain community in your on screen, you should have that reflected in your writer's room, on your crew as well. So there are some things that are made, and I'm like, there wasn't a single Black person in this writer's room. And I'm like, what is this Caribbean accent? Why does this person sound like a Trini, a Jamaican, and a Bajan all at once? Like, why do they sound Scottish? Okay, they're from Jamaica. What is happening here? So I think, we have to now talk about authentic storytelling and what that actually is and what that means to us, you know? And how can we honor the communities that we're representing in our storytelling as well? So that will be one of my main things.
Thank you so much for that. It's interesting that you talked about all of us on learning. All of us on learning. I was watching an interview. They were interviewing Viola Davis, and she said something around, yes, I escaped from poverty, but emotionally I was still stuck in there, right? So all of us really need to make that conscious effort to start unlearning all of these things that's been either fed to us, you know, and that we absorbed. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
So, all of you filmmakers, we have somewhat of a business side of things, especially independent filmmakers. We have to be entrepreneurs, we have to be creatives. And so, this is a long-winded question. As a business person, we can't start a project without having a goal, without having a termination point. And my question for you guys is, what's the termination point for this the BIPOC movement? What would constitute a win? Like, when do we get to the finish line?
Go ahead, attempt it first, and then we'll move over. I'll let you.
So for me, I think, and this is just like my own personal perspective on this, is that
Do you want to take it?
I think one big win for me would be to have proper proportional representation for things. Like, Toronto is a great example where I think it's 53% of Toronto is non-white. So, but when you look at the productions that are made in Toronto, the vast majority of the people on screen and behind the screen are white. So a big thing for me would be, okay, if you're making a production in Toronto and it involves Torontonians, it should fairly represent the actual demographics of Toronto, because otherwise it's conflated in one direction. And I think this, like, the idea of like, well, how do we make sure we don't go too far? Like, I think it's like, there's a long way to go before we even get to the too far part. And one thing that we're starting to see is like CBC's mandate where they're like, okay, you need to have more BIPOC representation. A lot of shows, what they're actually doing to circumvent that is they continue to hire the same white writers, directors, the 6 key creatives are writers, directors, editors, composers, cinematographers, and production designers. So they get all the same ones that they usually get, and then they get like shadow directors or like mentees who are non-white to occupy those spaces, to be like, look, we have like 20% like BIPOC folk on this production, but they're all they're like assistants or they're like grips or whatever it is. So I think that a big part of that for me is that proportional representation has to also apply to the key creatives, especially on shows that, like you were mentioning, are about these groups. Like Transplant, and I'm putting Transplant on blast here, and I hope that they see this, because Transplant is made in Canada, and it's about this Syrian doctor who's a refugee and who's working in Canada. They don't have any Syrians involved in any of these key creative roles. They have like Syrian, I think, writing consultants. They might have one writer this year, but let alone any other West Asian, right? They don't even have Syrians. So for me, it's like a big part is at the very least try to get that proper representation for those stories.
For me, that success would look like more stability within the independent production community for companies that are owned and operated by BIPOC people. And stability for me would mean that you have a development slate that is properly financed, as opposed to we're oversubscribed, we're going to give you 30% of your ask, because each time that you are underfunded and you have to readjust your budget, it means then you just continue on that, what I call the treadmill. You are not advancing. And the same thing about being able to finance productions that are at a certain level, budget level, so that as a producer, you actually are able to be properly compensated for all the free work done prior to development and all the work done in between to get the thing produced. So until we have that kind of stability in the independent production community where you're not waiting 4 to 8 years between each project that you produce, then it's not a successful situation, you know. And I don't think it's hard to fix, but the will isn't there as yet. I think we still have these, what I call patchwork Band-Aid solutions, you know, that let's just throw a little bit of money here, tamp things down for a little bit and see where it goes.
Let's just do the checklist. Yeah. Please hold your thought. I just want to check, how are we doing our virtual audience? Do we have questions from them? I don't want to leave them out. Any questions from our virtual audience? Where is Mandy? No? Okay, go ahead then.
I just had a question to possible program to expand. Earlier you were talking about culturally that you were to be a doctor or lawyer, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So culturally you were going into high schools. I just want to hear more about that program.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That sounds like really a great place to go.
Yeah.
And what's going on with that, and who's involved, and how that's working.
So far I've reached out to various other filmmakers who are non-white, Black, Indigenous, people of color, to come and give little mini talks at, we trial run it with the high school that I went to, Sir Frederick Banting in London, Ontario, which has a pretty big non-white student body. And it went pretty well. Like we had people who asked lots of questions, who emailed me afterwards, who emailed some of the other people. And we want to try to, like now the school year is ending, but ideally for September, we can hopefully try to do this with more high schools. And I was actually meaning to reach out to BIPOC TV and film. Because I didn't want to go to BIPOC TV and film until we had at least dry runned it, which it went pretty well. But yeah, I remember distinctly being in high school and thinking that this was an impossible feat, or other kids that I went to high school with who wanted to do it and were like, it's not possible, like, my parents are struggling to survive, I need to make sure that I can do something that's tangible and that there's a living. But the reality is, like, the film industry is very tangible and there is a living. Like, even if you want to be like, let's say a tailor, right? Like, you can do that in the film industry. If you want to go into culinary arts, you can do that in the film industry. You want to be an accountant, you can do it in the industry, right?
You know what's crazy for me? A driver.
Yeah.
You could be a driver, you know. So
Can I comment on that question, because I'm actually thinking about parents. So it's easy or easier to go to school and talk to the students and they go, yes, that's what I want to do. And then they go home to their parents, somebody like me, I'm like, come on, wake up. You know, you don't have, people say generational wealth. I say generational connection, right? You don't have that connection that will push your dream forward. So how can we start getting parents to have a mind shift?
That's, while you were talking, Farhan, I was just like, yes, I understand it's crucial to speak to kids so then they see the possibility of it and they could get excited by all the opportunities. But also just speaking with parents as well, I feel like that's one of the major hurdles with it. And honestly, as much as I grew up in this very liberal, hippy-dippy family, like my mom is still very much a traditionalist, and it's really just in the maybe past 3-4 years that she's finally accepted, like, oh, okay, you're good. But she needed to see that I was okay financially, that I was stable. And that's what I've said, that's the real worry. It's, I don't want my child to struggle. I went through it. I don't want my child to do it. So, and I'm always happy to speak to parents. I'm one as well. I have a 12-year-old. But that's the next step. And I saw, I was at Ryerson for a while. I worked in at the faculty of, what was called then the Faculty of Communication and Design. And that's where I noticed where a key part of the recruitment process was missing. That conversation with racialized parents. And going out to them and explaining to them what it actually was. And one of the most heartbreaking things I saw there, because I was there during the first year of the pandemic, was how many of the few racialized students at that school, a lot of them were expressing that they didn't feel supported at home, because now they're dance students, but they're at home. They're theater students, but they're at home, and not feeling that sense of support from family when they need quiet time. And that's usually because the family doesn't understand and accept what they have chosen to do, you know? So I think that that's a crucial piece to it. So I'm happy. We've been talking about doing something like that for us, so this is perfect. But how we could reach both students and parents. So we'll make that happen.
Can I also follow up on that? And I don't know if we have another question from the audience, but so we see everybody here. Somebody may be saying, you're right, but how do I have this conversation with my parents? Can you break it down? How can they have this conversation?
I can tell you mine.
Until you get to them, before you get to them.
So I distinctly remember the conversation that I had with my dad. And again, on the outside, he was like very supportive. I have a great father who is very supportive of us. But I could tell on the inside, he was like a little concerned, especially because my dad, full disclosure, hates movies. Like, just like with a passion, like does not like movies, doesn't like fictional books, like he's like checked out on all of it. But I asked him a bunch of questions, and you know, as kids, you know your parents very well. So while your parents might be the head of the family, right? As kids, you know how to control the muscles that turn that head, right? So I sat down to have a conversation with my dad one time on a drive, and I knew what the answers to all these questions were, but I had an agenda. So I was like, Dad, when you were young, was there anything that you wanted to do, like with your career, that you might not have had the chance? He's like, yeah, I wanted to be a pilot. And I was like, well, why couldn't you be a pilot? And he's like, well, I wear glasses, so they were like, you have to have 20/20 vision, you can't be a pilot. And I'm like, do you ever think back on what life would have been like now if you could be a pilot? And he like started to smile. He's like, yeah, I like imagine soaring over the clouds and like seeing all these mountains and whatever all the time. Like I wish I could have done it. And I'm like, so you couldn't pursue your dream job because other people didn't let you? He's like, yeah. I was like, I don't want filmmaking to be that for me. And then he started laughing and he's like, okay.
That is really a good one. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Okay, go ahead.
So I'm a composer, so my question's going to be on the music side of things. So I think that when these discussions occur, a lot of it has to do with people who are at the front of a production, so directors, producers. But when it comes to people who are on the other side, and people in pre-production, screenwriters, people in post-production like editors or animators or whatever, and especially with composers, I continuously get this assumption that because I'm black, I write a certain type of music, right? And I feel like writers, artists, because of who they are, it's assumed that is represented in your art, just based on what you look like. And I feel like, well, I want to know how you move past those barriers, where people are assuming that you can't do something because of the way you look. Like, for example, I don't write hip-hop music, I write orchestral music. And I always get asked that question, are you a SoundCloud rapper? It's the dumbest question, but how do you move past that?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Who's gonna take it? Okay, dude.
While you were speaking, I thought of Tika Simone, who won the Canadian Screen Award this year for, I believe, Best Original Song. And Tika and I have had a lot of conversations about that, with her experiences moving from being a musician for years to moving into film, composing for film and TV. And a lot of times she saw like the biases even in that education as well, and the assumptions that are made of us. Tika is also a larger than life personality, so I'm sure she had like a lot to say back to that, but the extreme challenges, and I think it's what she started to do was point to all of the racialized composers who are doing this. So that's what she combated the argument with examples, and to show how many people have been doing this work, and how remarkable they are. So I think that's one of the main parts too, in showing that, hey, I'm not the first, I'm not the only one. And then we also have to talk about how so often blackness is put into a box in terms of what you should be, and how you should be working. So I think it's a lot of times like finding those examples of people who've broken out of it, and also just doing you anyway. Just do you.
Just do you.
About Quincy Jones as
yes.
well, and when he started out, and he just blazed a trail for himself.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to start rounding up. We have to. I know. But like I said, feel free, grab her, okay? Get her to answer some of your questions that you still have, please. But anyways, this has been amazing. Before we conclude, I just want one word, please. Pretend like there are senior filmmakers, directors. I don't know if they are here, but pretend like they are here. Give them a call to action. One word.
Perseverance.
Thank you.
Stubbornness? Is that a word?
Say it again.
Stubbornness?
Stubbornness, okay.
Can you tell I'm a writer?
I've already feel this.
Try. Use a lot of hyphens.
You're talking like a... But, allyship,
love that. Boldness, audacity, the list keep going on. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, wonderful panelists. Thank you. second, I really need to thank Wendy and team for organizing this session, for organizing this event. This is amazing. And let me leave you with one word, and I saw this quote by Ava Dover, and it says, "Don't wait for permission to do something creative," right? So the key is, what do you want? Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we can go.
That was a great session. That was really informative for everybody. Thank you so much, all of you, for doing that. And one piece of advice, just going on what Farhan was saying about the high schools and stuff. Having come from teaching in high schools and high school film production, I watched my classes go from, in the 1990s being almost completely white to the most diverse in like the 2010s. And it is really important to get those kids at that age, because I saw all those things. I saw it with the parents. I had to convince so many parents, your kids, they're going to be fine. If they work hard, they're going to be fine no matter what. And it was always the immigrant families that had faced that issue. And I had so many times in parent-teacher interviews, I would sit there and I would face those questions and have to, fight for the kids. I'd talk to the kids beforehand and be like, okay, what do I say? How do I help you out, in this situation? And I would try to fight for them. But that is the root of where you can really start to make a difference, is in that area. And I saw films that I never would have seen, that stories I never would have seen, if I didn't have that diverse group of kids that were in there, right here in Oakville. So yeah, it's a good spot to start, and keep that kind of initiative going. Talk to the teachers that are, the ComTech teachers, and that are around the province and stuff, and just keep it going, because they're the ones that can really help out with those initiatives. So anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've got lunch is going to be I don't know, there's some stuff out there already. If you don't have your drink tickets, who's got, Greg over there's has been giving out drink tickets. You've got 3 drink tickets. Those cover anything. So anything from,
that's my second. So
grabbing a Coke to a mixed drink or whatever.
I have twins.
So the bar's open.
To close it up, and I got
so
2
enjoy.
boys.
Be back at 1 o'clock, or 1 or 1:15.